introductions. Jennifer, you start.
Oh, Jennifer Fensel, East Central Iowa Council of Governments.
John Rathbun, Project Coordinator.
Casey Hutchinson, Johnson County Planning.
Amy Foster, City of Coralville. Jody Bailey with the Soil and Water Conservation District in Johnson County.
John Gehring, Iowa County Board of Supervisors.
Ben Clark, City of Iowa City.
And Jennifer is now her evil twin. It's like I know her. I told you 3 evil twins.
Thank you.
All right.
You need that, right?
Approval of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same signs. Motion carries. Board minutes from last week.
So moved.
Yes, I am. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. The minutes are adopted. Clear Creek Watershed Planning Process Update, Miss Jennifer Fensel, 15 minutes.
But I might have misspoken when asked about the time. And also,
Don't push your microphones. Otherwise, you can't hear that.
Hello? We're on TV? We don't want to be on TV.
also I can't make the computer work.
I don't think they're working.
Which is bad because I didn't,
You can't hear us.
because I don't know what else to do if I can't make this work.
I got it.
I want it to just open.
Bring it up on your computer, like where
It
you see
is.
it.
It is.
And then the display setting.
Do I just do that? Or do I need to,
Slideshow
I just want to from beginning?
from beginning.
I didn't know that on TV.
I didn't either. I had no idea they were re-recording. Does it make you feel weird?
He's gonna come help us.
He's going to come help us. He's coming right now to help us.
That was exciting. Should have worked, I'm sorry.
I tried to, yeah. I don't know how to make it happen.
Wow.
But it's not like the gray weather either. I know, and it was like showing, okay, how'd you do that? Oh, you started over. Good idea. Well, so I could talk about it and just not show you anything, I guess.
We'll wait till it gets really cold, then we'll start again.
Steaming it. It'll feel great for the.
Yeah.
We could have John talk.
Yeah, we
Let's
could.
go, John.
We could.
Certainly.
Okay.
Now we have time.
Are you going into practice implementation?
If that's okay.
Yeah, I'll do practice implementation first. Can you hear me?
Yeah, the microphones are for the TV.
Okay.
Never mind the guy behind the curtain.
All right, I'll hold this and talk at the same time. So on our projects, I've met with 4 new landowners about projects. Our first and second bid packages have passed the Tier 2 site-specific reviews. We'll be gathering cost share payments and signed agreements soon, hopefully within the next month. Met with 2 landowners to review plans, developing bid packet number 3 and subsequent bid packages with the goal of bidding out all projects by the end of next summer. The appraiser has been chosen, Farmers National Company. They're working out contract details with Johnson County. Outreach since our last meeting, we had a booth at the Johnson County Fair. We shared that with the Johnson County Soil and Water Conservation District. There was a lot of turnout. It was a good deal. I'm working with Iowa Flood Center's Dr. Just and Johnson County Conservation on an EPA-funded oxbow. We had a picnic September 21st. It was rained out, but we did have 4 hearty souls attend. We enjoyed the winning rhubarb custard pie. Latest newsletter went out by mail and email. Administratively, I've been working with Jennifer on portions of the watershed management plan. Our financials to date, this is a new item. Our grant share for construction is $2,980,781. So far, we've spent $250,231.93 on engineering, $30,848 on archaeology. This is the one that saddens me, 0 on construction, and we've had 0 cost share so far. Our balance right now is $2,699,701.07. With our bid packet number 1 and 2, that should take us down to $2,300,183. And hopefully number 3 will take us closer to $2 million. Upcoming is bidding and construction.
John, I had a question. So when after these 3 bid packages are constructed,
Yeah.
we'll still have around $2 million left?
Yeah, but I'm working on forecasting what the grand total is, and right now, without all of the projects priced out, we'll be well over our $2,900,000. Right now, we're projecting if we get additional funding, we'd be at about $3.5 million, possibly $4.
Okay, so you're just going to keep running it out and see if we get some additional funding and...
Well, I don't think I'm going to be meeting with any new people. The last few I've met with, I've told them that it's possible we'll be able to fund them, and we don't know yet based on what other people do and what prices come in at.
Okay.
So we got an email that in December at the annual meeting, they'll be telling us that they're going to look at reshuffling cost share or funds, and for I think March is a projection for what we will spend and what we would like to ask for, and so I've been working towards that already.
So a good amount of interest.
There is a great amount of interest. We've got probably 90 some odd individual practices we're looking at.
Does anybody have any questions?
What was the average for the bid package, the goals?
Our goal is about 150,000, and so far we've been, let's see, with 1 and 2, I think the total is 440,000. So one is about 180, and the other one is higher. And then for our next item, as long as I'm up, these are applications for assistance. These are 5 mostly new people. The last one, number 5, O'Donnell, is the neighbor of a previous application. The second page shows us where they're all located within the watershed. They're actually all in the middle sub-watershed. Did we turn to the last one, or are we going to go one by one?
I'm on the last one. You can do whatever.
Let's start with that last one, because the neighbor to the east, the one that's outlined in the black and white dashed line, they're interested in extending a wetland that the neighbor to the west is interested in doing. It's a really low area, and I think we'd wind up doing an excavated wetland in this area. If a wetland doesn't work out for them, they are interested in a grassed waterway as another option.
So is that other neighbor already signed up?
Yep.
Who is that?
It's Stramaglia.
Oh, okay.
I think that was at our last meeting that we approved his application. So if we work forwards from the last page, number 4 is Amana Farms. And this is, there's a lot of different options that we're looking at. The main one is kind of a floodplain restoration, possibly a slight re-meandering of that creek, reconnecting the floodplain and doing a filter strip on both sides. They're also looking at possibly doing some grassed waterways into that and some basins as well. So there's a number of projects. I didn't lay each of them out on this page here.
Okay.
And then the next one is Facelt, and they're under the name of Buffalo Creek Development. This is it's a cattle pasture mostly right now. They're going to develop it into housing. It's north of Tiffin. And we looked at it initially to see about a pond, but because it's a blue line stream, we're not really looking at that anymore. But the creek itself is pretty deeply incised from the old floodplain to the surface of the creek. Right now it's probably 6 or 7 feet down. So they were actually really interested when I brought up the idea of excavating down and reconnecting that creek to the floodplain and then seeding that all down with prairie. So that's what they're looking at doing.
Okay.
And the next one is 2 wascobs, possibly 4, 2 more further up the hill. That would be kind of to the southeast. And then the last one is a small pond. That one's located on the south edge of the watershed, down south of Oxford and west of Oxford a little bit.
So do we need a motion to approve
Yes, please.
for approval or assistance in review?
Approval of the application.
Okay. I'll put a motion to approve these applications.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion to approve the applications? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Does anybody have any questions for John before we go on?
I got a comment.
Let's have comments.
You're doing really good work, John. Really thankful to have you. These are really great applications.
Thank you. I'm actually very excited about the one development project. That could be really cool. Most developers just ignore the creek that runs through their development, and this way they can make it kind of the focal point. And it can hold a lot of floodwater, I hope.
Cool.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you. Jennifer, are you ready again?
Oh, look at that.
All right.
So, as I said, I'm Jennifer Fensel. I'm the Environmental Services Director with East Central Iowa Council of Governments. I don't know how many of you are aware that ECOG is actually under new leadership. Our Executive Director of 25 plus years retired here a few months back. And so we have a new director. Her name is Karen Kurt. She was the city administrator for the city of Platteville, Wisconsin. And one of the new changes is that she wanted us to have a standardized presentation that kind of gave a little information about our organization, which is a very good reminder for me because I'm terrible at that. So that was our map of our region, I guess I should have pointed out, and this is a list of the services that ECOG provides. We're a regional planning organization. Our members are cities and counties. We basically serve the smaller communities that don't have professional planning staff, and of course we still also work with metro areas too. So, the Clear Creek Watershed Plan. This has been, I feel like, a very long time in coming together, but that's sort of what you do when you piece a couple of different funding streams and some technical partners. And so I just wanted to mention that the assessment and planning has been funded through the Iowa Department of Natural Resources in their Watershed planning grant. The city of Coralville has provided funding. The Iowa Watershed approach, a component of that is the watershed planning dollars made available to those watersheds that were selected. And then tons and tons of partners. A lot of you are in the room. DNR, IDALS, the Iowa Flood Center, UNI, and a couple of different departments there actually, city and county staff, SWCD staff, and Aaron, formerly with HR Green and now with EOR. So this is kind of a crazy slide, but I tried to capture the general gist of the watershed, just the watershed conditions or the description of the watershed. So basically, it's over 66,000 acres. It's a mix of urban and rural. There's about half of it is in row crop. There's 23% grasslands, 14% developed, and 7% in tree-lined areas or forest. There are upland hills, about 84%, which I was surprised at, is considered highly erodible land. There is seasonal nutrient loss, but actually sediment and the bacteria are a little more significant in this watershed, different from other watersheds in the state. There is livestock operations. I don't know that there's super large livestock operations, and that number has been falling according to the agricultural census, but there's still more livestock animals than there are people. So, and in terms of flooding, flooding has plagued this watershed. Their big one was in June of 1990, but they've had the next three highest peaks have been since then, so 93, 2008, and 2013. So relatively recently, and that's since the records have been kept in 1952. So I just wanted to show kind of a general overview of the watershed. This is obviously showing elevation. You can sort of, this is very oversimplified, but you can sort of say higher in the watershed, there's more agriculture, more hilly. Middle, few more grassland areas and a little more of the tree, the forested covered areas. And then in the lower, it's sandy, it's developed, and it's flashy. So I love this historical view of the creek. This comes from the Lower Clear Creek Stream Assessment Report that Aaron did. And this is comparing 1930 to 1980, but the point here is just to sort of see that as development has happened, the creek has been straightened, to sort of make room for where we wanted it to go. I also was very interested that there can be migration of up to 10 feet a year, which is, what? That's a technical term. So, talking about flooding, this is a very nice representation of what the 0.2%, or what some people know as the 500-year flood. I know we're not supposed to really use that, but that's generally what people refer to it as. And I think it's interesting to note that level really impacts all the way up through the watershed. It's not just that it impacts the lower portions. This is a little more zoomed into the Coralville and Iowa City area. This does include the flooding inundation for Iowa River, but you can see that it very much has an impact on the creek and backing water up into the creek. And again, that's the 0.2%. So then talking about losses, this is an analysis that the Iowa Flood Center did also, and looking at repetitive lost properties, and that's defined as having damages of at least $1,000 and that has flooded at least twice in the past 10 years. And so that does not capture, likely, the 1990, the 1993, and possibly even some of the 2008 flooding damages, and it also doesn't, it's just buildings. It does not include any of the agricultural losses that might have been suffered by any of the flooding. But just from buildings and repetitive loss, it's 2.1 million. John helped with this, well, actually did this analysis with assistance from James Martin. And I'm going to give a stab at explaining this, but if there are any questions, I want John to jump in. So what John did is he looked at an analysis of potential nutrient reduction wetland on on-road structure sites. So basically, that would be, and that's the lower representation, so that would be where you would go out and find an area where within the county road department system, their system of rural roads, you would find areas that maybe have had washouts or damage or repeated flooding, and you would work it out so that you could create the culvert either smaller or the bridge smaller, or create a way to hold that water back. And so the representation of the little sketch and then the pie chart is area 3, or the area that was identified, and that corresponds to the 3 on the chart. And so the orange is the total sediment delivery in tons per year, and the yellow is the pounds of phosphorus delivered per year. And what those bars are trying to get across is the potential reduction in both sediment and phosphorus that could be realized if you built this little fish-shaped structure. It's cute. John, did I do any of that even possibly correct at all?
Yeah, I think so. I didn't see this slide this morning.
I know.
Caught me unaware.
I got, I just couldn't stop. It's too much fun. Okay, so, and I was also going to point out that if you were to move forward with some of those nutrient reduction wetland sites, and there were 11 of them, I believe, that were possible
That sounds
potential
right.
sites, moving forward with any of them would have a dual benefit of both water quality and then also a little bit of flood storage. So this map shows nitrogen loss. Let me make sure I get the details right. So in this watershed, nitrogen isn't as big of a problem as in some watersheds in Iowa. However, there still is a nutrient loss, and of course there's a value to those nutrients being used on agricultural land, which is where we come up with how many dump truck loads and at a value of over $300,000.
Is that per
loss.
truck? Is that?
No, I think it's total.
That's total.
That seems really low.
I think it's total.
What's it based on?
Oh boy, so I'm gonna have to refer to John.
Yeah,
I remember
that's based on the area and the nitrogen load. So the pounds of nitrogen leaving the watershed on a yearly basis.
And I believe the value is something around 38 cents per.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Seems with the
Per pound?
Per pound, yeah.
And so, it could be that it's a low estimate, but so we'll say conservatively.
And that was an average over 5 years too, so that includes dry years and wet years. Wet years, there's more lost, and
Right.
dry years less.
And so the standard that is typically used to look at to just assess or to understand nitrogen loads is the 10 milligrams per liter drinking water limit. And you can see just based on the color, you don't have a whole lot of areas, although there are some that are over that 10 milligrams per liter. But I guess I would also say that I don't think that anyone at least very close is getting their drinking water, certainly not straight from Clear Creek, but on the river or down Iowa River, there could be some communities that would impact. So any amount of nitrogen that we can reduce would be a good thing. And then also this sort of represents something similar that you see in other watersheds in Iowa, and that is that the higher concentrations of nitrogen tend to be in the more agricultural areas of the watershed, and in this case, that is definitely concentrated more toward the eastern part of, or the upper reaches of the watershed. So we have, this represents, one of the assessment activities that happened was a RASCL, or a Rapid Assessment of Stream Conditions Along Length. I like RASCL better. Basically, it's just you send some folks out and they physically walk the stream and make note of the conditions that they're seeing. This is a combination, this map is a combination of RASCLs that were done by folks in 2006 when there were some watershed projects happening in Clear Creek. Also for our planning process in the years 2016 through 2018. The whitish, if you see the color kind of pop a little bit with the white, those are the more recent ones. The other colors are the ones that were done in 2006. And so here, this is an in-stream habitat quality assessment. So it's taking a bunch of the indicators or characteristics that they were recording, like the size of the rocks, whether there's woody debris present, probably shade, aquatic vegetation, that kind of thing, to sort of generalize and come up with a measure of the quality of the habitat. And as you can see, there's not a whole lot of blue, which is excellent. There is some yellow, which is average, but there's a fair amount of red too, which is not what you want to see. Now, this is also limited by the areas that our folks were able to go and walk. We weren't able to get permission. In the urban areas, that's no problem, but in the rural areas, it's private property, and you can't just go do that kind of assessment work without permission. So, some of the other indicators are stream health, bank stability, livestock access, which does show up. There's a kind of a cool map of that one, but I don't have that. Riparian land cover, sedimentation, and water clarity. All of those will be in the plan. See, baiting you to want to read the plan. See? Okay, so hydrology. This was a part of the planning process that was taken on by the Iowa Flood Center. I just picked some of the highlight things, and this map stood out to me. This is basically trying to show you the runoff potential at the different points. Basin, I guess the lowest part of each basin represented A, B, C, D, E, and F. It is technically the runoff coefficient as a percent if all of the rainfall was converted to runoff for the simulation period that they looked at, which was 2002 through 2016. And so it's basically saying if all the rain just went directly to the streams, the red areas is where you're going to get more of the runoff versus the lighter areas with less.
Is that mostly based on like topography and?
I think so. Of course, it was a very detailed description of the model and the calibration, and I would not want to try and.
Potential. It's for potential.
It's potential.
Yep.
Yes.
It definitely has to do with that. C is runoff coefficient, and so if it's sloped, it won't infiltrate as much. If it's flat, it will, and that is essentially.
Yes. So I do think it takes in a lot of those different characteristics. Part of running that runoff coefficient and runoff potential is to come up with areas where if you were going to put ponds and hold water back, these would be the places that you would want to do it. And so you've got your, the higher red would be more ponds per subbasin, the lighter color less. And then for each monitoring point, you can see they show the number of ponds that you would need to put in that area, the drainage area, and then the peak reduction. And the two different columns for peak reduction, the first one is assuming historic precipitation levels, just things as they are, or as I guess they have been, versus an assumption for increased precipitation, which is what's forecasted due to climate change. And so another thing that they looked at was running scenarios with this hydrology model to see where, what different types of practices, what impact that would have on flood stage reduction. And so the scenarios that they ran would be the native vegetation. The first set of bars is assuming to convert 100% of row crop acres to native vegetation. The middle one, the cover crop no-till, is assuming that you adopt no-till and cover crop on 100% of the row crop acres in the watershed. And then that final smaller bars is the distributed storage, the number of ponds that we saw in the previous map. And then the baseline. And so while these are not necessarily likely scenarios to fully have 100% of the watershed in anything, it definitely demonstrates the impact, and so that you can sort of judge based on the limited resources you might have, where should we put the money? And you can see that ponds do have some effect, but they're not going to get us there, for sure. The other thing to note is that the green bars is the precipitation sort of assumed as it has been, and the black is the increased precipitation. Okay, social assessment. So one of the partners that we worked with was the University of Northern Iowa Center for Social and Behavioral Research Center. No, centers first. Our nice Mary, our friends at UNI. So they did a survey of agricultural, or I guess that should be more clarified. It was landowners, rural landowners, whether they owned the property and actually farmed it, or whether they rented it out, or whether they were producers that rented. And so this is just a sort of a representation of the respondents' agreement or disagreement with the statements about land stewardship. And so I wanted to point out that in general, we've got a lot of agreement with these statements. I'm, steward of the land. Definitely, I know the steps that I can take. I'm concerned about it, and the actions I take can, there are actions I can take, so a lot of agree. And then we get to the part where we think about assigning blame and cost, and then things maybe go 10 more to, I'd prefer not to really have an agree or disagree. So those two are 33% say, I don't really want to say one way or the other on the whole blame issue, and I'd rather not say on the cost issue as well, which I thought was interesting. So then they also did a social assessment on urban folks. And in this case, they were listing a whole bunch of factors that might impact our local waterways. And this is the degree to which they felt like these particular issues contributed to any problems in local streams. And so I thought it was interesting that of the top 10 contributing factors, and these are urban respondents, that they felt like urban-related things contributed, and that might be a factor that they see that in their neighborhoods. And then 3 of the top 10 were more rural. So again, I think, I don't know, I don't want to assign, but it does seem to me like, and that's similar to other surveys that I've seen in other watersheds, and so I do have to wonder if it's that's what they see and know more about. Okay, so that was a lot of pictures, and I know those are much easier to look at. I'm going to go through the goals just really quickly. I condensed these down a lot. There's a lot more in the goals and implementation strategy table, and that plan will be available next, I'm hoping late next week for a more thorough review. But so in terms of flood goals, so from the urban point of view, we want to manage our stormwater, obviously, BMPs, buyouts, detention. Recommending policies, definitely want to focus on getting our communities into the community rating system and see if they can, move themselves up in participation of that. Protecting our critical infrastructure and connecting to the hazard mitigation plans, which I think will be important future funding sources for doing some implementation. And then improving community resilience. And definitely this idea of having outreach and raising awareness that flood impacts more than just structures. It impacts people's lives. You may not be flooded, but you definitely may be impacted by not being able to get to work or having some other disruption. So some more flood goals. This is more focused in the rural areas. We want to get the conservation practices implemented wherever we can. John's goal, or I guess the goal of the Iowa Watershed Approach Project was 72 practices. Sounds like we're going to blow well past that. So getting those projects done. And then these on-road structures partnering with the county road department. When it comes to water quality goals, I was not going to list all of the practices because there are many, but these are the targets that we're hoping to reach in reducing nutrients and bacteria and sediment in our waterways. We were going to follow the nutrient reduction strategy in the 41% nitrogen load reduction, but in phosphorus, we're going to take that a little further to 86, and then in E. coli, really try and reduce that a lot. Recreation is a big thing and a big concern and a draw for people in the lower part of the stream, but with the bacteria levels being what they are, it's probably prudent to try and get those bacteria levels down as people use the waterways. And then addressing sediment. Then we also have basically urban stormwater BMPs, and all of them. We definitely want to promote all of them. So we combined our habitat and recreation goals. We're looking to get the quantity and quality of habitat up wherever we can. Those are some of the ways: oxbow restoration, native vegetation, raising awareness and getting people more involved, having events and that kind of thing to get people to care a little more about the creek. The stream assessment report that Aaron did, we want to get as many of those recommendations implemented as we can find resources to do that. And then continue to work with folks on recreation. More access was something that came up a lot, more engagement with the stream, and so trying to do things and take steps to further that. So then we have a couple of goals for the Clear Creek Watershed Coalition just as an organization. Obviously doing the plan and creating some method of tracking the implementation and the success. Establish a funding mechanism to implement the plan, because all of these things are definitely going to take time and money and people power. Supporting a watershed coordinator position after the grant is expired, which is in the later part of 2021, and then having an outreach and education plan. And definitely more pie would be good. So that's kind of a really quick sum up of the plan and what you can expect that will be in the plan. The document itself is coming along, but I do hope to have it within the next week or so posted in a place where you can review it yourself. So, any questions? Yes, thank you for the computer.
No problem. Any idea, any thoughts of where the E. coli is coming from? If you're going to try to get that 94% reduction, is there any hint on where to focus?
Well, so I think there is some, livestock areas that definitely, some of the strategies in that part of the goals is to focus on manure nutrient management and the plans and try to, continue that. We do not have definite source data. And so if money were available to do that, that would be something good to do.
Two wastewater treatment plants in the watershed, both of which are in line for upgrades in the next couple of years as well.
That's right. Yeah, Oxford and Tiffin would both be. Yep. And probably other issues too, but yeah.
Good question. Anybody else?
It just so happens that that bright red spot in the middle of the top of the watershed where it says we need more ponds, we've got more ponds there. We'll have more ponds there.
See, it's all coming together. It's all coming together.
You're still not getting a raise.
Yeah, you will, John.
Come on.
Yeah, you will.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer. Iowa Watershed Approach Partner Updates.
Oh, my chair's very low.
Nice job. You want to switch? Because mine's very high.
Look at how funny that is. No, I'm fine. Thank goodness for the computer.
Please introduce yourself.
Yes, hi, my name is Vanessa Fixmo-Rise, and I am with Ustig Planning, and I'm just pulling this up. My apologies.
That's all right.
Just take 1 second here.
I want to see her.
Luckily, there's only one thing in that folder.
Surprise.
Yeah. I know, right? As long as my email doesn't come up, I think I'm okay.
I have kids and grandkids. You never know what you're going to get.
Yeah, so thank you for letting me come today. Like I said, my name is Vanessa Fixmo-Rise, and I am very fortunate to be working with the Iowa Flood Center and the Flood Resilience team on this Coralville Flood Resilience Action Plan. And I wanted to start out a little bit by saying that these flood resilient action plans are, this isn't the only one. It's part of the IWA, and there are several others that are out right now. I was fortunate to be a part of the one that was in Vinton getting kicked off, and so I'm very excited to be working on this flood resilience action plan here in Coralville, and look forward to talking to you about it. So really, it's just going to be kind of very quick. We just started this project literally this month, so I'm just going to kind of show you who our team is, the structure behind it, our scope of work, and then if you have any questions, we're literally just getting started on like a 16-month project. So you'll see my face again. So I am representing actually 3 others, and 3 other people and 3 other organizations. I feel really lucky. When we got together, when I was thinking of, who would be awesome project partners, I thought, who would be awesome to have on my team? Instead of just project partners, these people came to mind. So John Bowler is the executive director for the Coralville Food Pantry, and I'm very fortunate to have him on board as part of the team. They really do serve a lot of the folks that we will be working with. And then Judy Joyce is principal of Impact 7G. I've worked with her very closely over the years, and she's actually the executive director of Take a Kid Outdoors. And so we're really fortunate to have her on board, and they are also providing some technical assistance. And Ayman Sharif is the director of the Global Food Project of Iowa City, and many of the members of that organization are also in what we would consider low to moderate income areas in Coralville that are definitely impacted by floods. So very excited to have this team. I think we have a good group of folks that are already working in the communities, and that's really what we needed. Just to look at some of the organizational structure, I don't really like hierarchies. If I could flatten this, I would. But we are working officially for the University of Iowa and partnering with the flood resilience team. I am the contact for the project itself, and then my partners, as I showed, are the Impact 7G, Coralville Food Pantry, and the Global Food Project of Iowa City. And then I kind of showed just some of the things that we'll be doing. So this is really, the Flood Resilience Action Plan is looking at how do we engage the community, and how do we really work with low to moderate income folks to make sure that that a plan is created so that they feel resilient when flood happens or water inundation happens or, flash flooding happens, what are ways in which they probably are resilient already, and how can they be supported in that? And so that's why you see city leaders, Coralville community members, businesses, there's a whole wide range of services and organizations that are support networks for all of us. And so how we will be engaging with all of these elements as well. So to just kind of look at our project scope, we are right now in this exploratory phase, and you don't have to read all of the text, but essentially we're going to be conducting research on, some of the research has already been done with the flood center as to, where are low to moderate income folks, according to the census, located. We'll be ground truthing that to see, does this line up with the flood data that's being projected or that has been historic? So we're kind of right in that phase right now. We will be putting together a website. We really want to have an interactive website where folks can go get information that the city already offers on emergency management, if that's available, and then also to gather stories. So I think that, one thing that's really powerful are stories that we tell. And so being able to connect people's voices to this project and have folks be able to submit stories that show up on the website that you can interact with, I think is really important, because I think people want to see that what they're experiencing isn't just going into this black box, into this void of, non-response. And so I think that being able to show that their voices are being heard is actually really important. It'll also be a site where you can find out where the events are, what events we're going to be at, and we're actually going to be hosting some workshops and open house as well. So it'll all be on that website, and we will be going into an outreach and education phase, which is actually looking at talking with city officials, talking with emergency management, and getting a sense of who are the community leaders. Where can we go to talk with folks that are disproportionately impacted, and what are some of your experiences? I've found that when we do this, it's an incredibly emotional experience. I mean, you could be talking to city leaders or public works or whoever it may be, and these are your first responders. I mean, these are folks that are taking people out of their basements and trying to find, their relatives. So I want to stress that, because I think that, when we think of plans or we think of flood resilience, I want to make sure that we're really creating that emotional component that is, I know Craig talks about this a lot too, but that we can really connect to one another and realize that when these things happen, that we do have community, that we are resilient. So we will be looking for leaders in the community to work with. We're going to be going door to door, actually, and seeing if we can interview folks that are in the community. That's why I have the team that I have, because the Coralville Food Pantry already serves a lot of these community members, and then Global Food Project of Iowa City, we already have a lot of those connections. So we'll be trying to garner their experiences, what resilience factors do they already have, and essentially just getting buy-in, because if people aren't engaged, then why are we creating this flood resilience action plan? It's not like a flood resilience meeting plan, So I think that that's really the point of it, is to make sure that we're really engaging with folks, and then we're then going to be going into this work phase. So once we've established connections and trust in the community, or built upon trust and connections that are already happening, we are going to have 2 workshops and an open house. And the open house is going to be, we've already done a lot of outreach. We want to bring folks together and actually have, like food and music. And I don't know if anybody went to that community meal that the Coralville Pantry put together at I think it was the middle school or the elementary school. It was incredible. I mean, they had food, and they had the children's museum was doing like cardboard. So, really looking at doing things differently, because who wants to go to a watershed meeting? I mean, really, raise your hand. And then we're always there, right? It's us. I'm familiar with the people in the room. Yeah, it's the 7 or 8 of us that show up to the meeting. So I think we're really going to try and do things a little bit differently. And the workshops are looking at how to get folks to understand what is resilience, and being able to put that in their community and say, this is how I am resilient and this is what resilience looks like. And so there's this education component that happens, but then also for them to be able to map out what does resilience look like for them. So we'll be doing those workshops. And at the end of this, in the writing phase, we'll have documented a lot of this, we'll have made a lot of connections. The idea is to put it all together in a way that is actionable. So we want buy-in from the community. We want city leaders to know that this is happening and that it's being supported, so that people can come and say, look, we have provided you with all this information and these ideas, and this is what would help us. And we have city officials and decision makers already in the know. And so how do we just take it and go? It's one of those times when you're just like, okay, we're going to create a plan, and I don't know what that plan is going to look like, but it is going to be created by the people, essentially for the people. And I think that what is beautiful about that is we really want to make sure that we have city leadership and our, professionals, our businesses, all of these folks and organizations that can kind of support resilience for low to moderate incomes and people that are disproportionately impacted. We also will be looking at some policies. I think it's really important to look at when flooding happens, who's getting moved out and how do we retain folks that are getting displaced. There's policies I know that have happening on the coast that they've dealt with. And so just looking at different ways, how can we provide some recommendations for retention and avoiding displacement. So those are some of the things that we're working on now. Obviously, this is just at the beginning is where we're at, but I know that was kind of a lot to look into. And so I really miss these days already, especially after today. But I don't know if folks have questions. I know it was kind of a lot of information.
Anybody?
I have a really simple
Mary Beth?
question. The ISET framework,
Yes.
what is that for?
I know. We're on the same wavelength, Mary Beth. So this ISET framework is actually a framework that we will be using. It's an international framework. I can't actually remember what the acronym stands for. I don't know. And this is kind of crazy. So it's an international framework that they use in Southeast Asia for several countries. But for our workshops, we're actually going to be using some of the stories and games that they have listed, because the whole idea is to get at this shared learning. So we take the local knowledge and the scientific knowledge, and we start to understand what resilience principles really are for the specific locality, which is very useful. And then it kind of goes into this understanding vulnerability and risk, and then building resilience. So we'll be doing vulnerability and resilience mapping. That's kind of what I was talking about a little bit earlier, with understanding what is vulnerability and what does that actually look like in your community. So actually doing the mapping of that comes after you kind of understand the resilience principles, and then building that resilience with the planning side of things. So there is going to be, the planning sort of technical things that will happen as well, kind of alongside. So you have that kind of shared knowledge happening. So I'm so glad you asked me. I put that in and I was like, well, just in case I need it. Turns out I did need it.
Go ahead.
Besides Benton and Coralville, what are the other communities that are doing resiliency plans?
Yeah.
So Quasqueton, they're a little bit north of here. Freeport, up near Decorah, in a partnership with Luther Community College, or Luther College. They've done a really nice job with this. And then we have any other ones on the official list? No. Well, yeah. We were going to do some work. We had Hamburg, Iowa, selected. And we're going to work there, but they're in a different mode of flood type work right now in recovery. And it didn't seem like the right time to kick all that off. So we had just got approval to work in Hamburg on something like this about a week or two before the floods came in that part of the state.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any other questions? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Look forward to seeing more.
Yeah, we'll definitely be back for updates and input, so thanks.
Super. Announcements and events. John?
So the Leadership for Midwest Watersheds is having its annual meeting in Cedar Rapids this year at the National Czech and Slovak Museum, November 6th and 7th. I've been attending that the last couple of years. It's a really good workshop. They have really good speakers and good conversation. Anybody's invited to come along. You should be able to let me know if you want to get signed up, and I'll get you the contact information. And then the IWA team meeting is in, oh, I didn't put that down. I think it's December 11th or 12th at the Fred Maytag II Scout Center in Des Moines.
It's the 5th.
The 5th. Thank you. But it is at 10 a.m.
There you go. You got that.
Any questions for John on that? Public comments. You're all sitting there biting your tongue, I know. Now's your opportunity.
Will these presentations be available?
Yeah, I'll definitely put them on the Clear Creek Watershed website.
Super. Any other comments? All righty. Next meeting is 5 p.m., January 15th, 2020, here at Coralville City Hall. Time flies when you're having
That's
fun.
right, 2020.
Wow.
Easy. I'm not ready for that.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank
Thank
you,
you,
everybody.
everybody.